Usually we have our running back rankings and our wide receiver rankings. We're going to be combining the two. I'm going to get you rankings for your flex spot. Now, of course, you can use these through the rest of your starting lineup, but a few different things. One, I am not going to be including tight ends. You do not flex a tight end. And if you have one in your starting lineup, please make sure you fix that right now. And two, I'm not going to be talking about the players at the very top. We already know you're starting Jefferson, Tyreek, CMC, Pollard, Bijan, Henry, Lamb, Amon-Ra, Diggs, Adams. That's already well known. Now, going a little bit deeper down, we still kind of already know you are starting Keenan Allen. I do just want to say Keenan Allen's going to be having a great week this week, ladies and gentlemen, with no Austin Eckler in the lineup. I mean, there are just so many damn targets available. Probably going to look to throw the ball quite often, but doesn't mean we should not be starting Joshua Kelly. We'll talk about Kelly later on. Now, at 12, we're going to go Jamar Chase. Still kind of up in the air if Joe Burrow will be playing or not. But honestly, if Burrow does not play, while of course we do move Chase down a bit, we are still starting Jamar Chase regardless. So please make sure this is a player that's in your starting lineup. We have A.J. Brown at 13. I understand, yes, you have had Devonta Smith, someone we'll talk about in a second, dominating so far through the first 2 weeks. But A.J. Brown still has had 16 targets. He's still A.J. Brown, just natural wide receiver volatility. He'll be better this next week. Then Chris Olave at 14. It's kind of crazy that both Thomas and Shaheed have been great in New Orleans, getting a considerable amount of volume. But at the same time, Chris Olave has been out there, and he's at the very top of the NFL right now in targets. I mean, with Chris Olave, love the talent. Derek Carr is moving the ball down the field. Going to be an interesting game against the Packers, though. Now, going down to our next tier, Travis Etienne, our running back, you know, the guy that we're saying to go out there and trade for everywhere. Going up against Houston Texans, 9.5-point favorite. We can assume that Etienne and this Jacksonville Jaguars offense, they're going to look to run the ball over and over and over again. And I want every part of that we can get. Now, Kenneth Walker is going to be playing Carolina, where whenever I wrote this down, the Seahawks were actually 4.5-point favorites over the Carolina Panthers. Now, we just got news that Bryce Young is going to miss this game. I am interested to see how this is going to change the line. Fundamentally, I don't really think that Bryce Young's a quarterback that really matters too much right now. Now, of course, with this being said, long-term Bryce Young's still great. I interviewed the guy at the draft. Of course, I am rooting for him. But yeah, now you have the Seahawks like 5.5, 6.5-point favorites, depending on the sports book that you are looking at. Nonetheless, they are going to be able to run the ball, and Kenneth Walker will be that dude. Now, Joe Mixon, our next guy at 17. With Mixon, you would move him down if Joe Burrow is not playing. Right now, I'm operating under the assumption that Burrow is playing. Looks a little more likely, where earlier in the week, the Cincinnati Bengals were 2-point favorites over the Rams. Now they are 3-point favorites. So it looks like Burrow is trending towards being available on Monday night. Now, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, our next two guys. Jalen Waddle did not practice on Thursday. Waddle's dealing with the concussion right now, so there's a possibility that we don't have him against the Denver Broncos, and there's a possibility that we are going to have to pivot. But with Devonta Smith at 19, a wide receiver we're starting no matter what. He's getting target volume. Hell, he's in an elite level offense. He is a player that we want every piece of. Now, Calvin Ridley and Puka are at 20 and 21. And if you really wanted to go through, and if you really wanted to put Puka at the top of this tier, I am not going to fault you whatsoever. If you want to rank Puka as a top 5 wide receiver this week, you do you. Going back to what we were discussing previously, I am more so going to be looking for the larger sample. We've had the larger sample of Devonta Smith and Calvin Ridley, both being dominant options in fantasy. But that's why we go through, and that's why we make these as tier lists, right? If you don't agree with the exact rankings in each specific tier, you make your own decision. You go out there and you start Puka over Calvin Ridley if you really want to. I just would really advise maybe not going through and starting, say, Puka over someone in the tier above like Jamar Chase. Now, going down to our next spot, we are going to be looking at Josh Jacobs at 22. With Jacobs, if you look at how bad this Las Vegas offensive line's been this season, if you look at how bad this Raiders team has been overall, it is very much frustrating. Now, with that being said, they are going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where right now they are anywhere from about 1.5 to 3-point favorites. They should be able to run the ball in the second half. Obviously, a much better game environment compared to what you had with Buffalo last week. Now, I will say it's going to be this Sunday night game, so it's pretty damn sad that we're going to be forced to watch the Raiders and Steelers on Sunday night. But now going over to our next guy, we will be looking at Ramondre Stevenson. with Ramondre in a full BBR format. I'm still excited about the involvement that he has as a receiver. Now, with that being said, I mean, they're going up against the Jets, where currently they are about 2.5-point favorites. This should be the lowest scoring game of the week, though. So if you're going to be looking at the over-under, right now the over-under for this Jets-Patriots game is only sitting at 37 to 36.5 total points. So typically, we are going to be avoiding everybody in this game that we can. You'll see that with Garrett Wilson later on. But as we're going through this, let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to take advantage of any of those pick'ems you see on the screen, make sure you go look at Underdog Fantasy. You can find that link in the description of this video in the comment section as well. If you sign up to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to be getting our updated rest of season rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be getting potentially a Flock Fantasy app. We shipped out about 100 of these today. Going to be shipping out a ton more tomorrow. So please make sure you do that ASAP. Find that link in the comment section. But our next guy will be Mike Evans. With Evans, I understand he's been dominant, right? You're going up against the Eagles. Against the Eagles, we just saw the Minnesota Vikings air the ball out, be able to effectively move the ball through the air. With that being said, I do think that Baker in this offense probably comes back down to earth just a bit. The Eagles are heavy favorites in this game. This will be a Monday night game, and Evans hasn't had some crazy amount of volume. I mean, with Evans, he's been very efficient, but I do think the efficiency comes back down to earth just a bit. Now, our next player will be Jamir Gibbs. Please, for the love of God, start Jamir Gibbs. Jamir Gibbs is a running back that is operating in an offense with a banged up Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jamir Gibbs is operating in an offense where you have no David Montgomery, where last week in his second NFL game ever, he led the team in targets. Now, with this being said, he is not all of a sudden going to turn into prime Ezekiel Elliott, prime Dalvin Cook, prime Christian McCaffrey because we have no David Montgomery. Craig Reynolds is going to have a role. The most concerning part of this is maybe Reynolds gets involved somewhat, specifically at the goal line. But nonetheless, in a full BBR format, in a plus matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, Jamir Gibbs should be able to rack up a ton of passing volume, which is something we really like. Now, James Cook will be our next running back at 26. James Cook is getting the consistent volume in Buffalo, which naturally is a very high-scoring offense, so you would think that there's a lot of touchdown upside. Now, the issue that we have with James Cook is we've seen it for 2 weeks straight now, that they are willing to use Damien Harris at the goal line. Not only are they not only willing to use Damien Harris, but they're willing to get Latavius Murray in there as well. So James Cook looks like he's probably not going to be the goal line back for Buffalo anytime soon, which does cap his touchdown upside in general. It is a very good offense where they are favored by 6.5 against Washington, though. Now, going over to our next tier, we're going to be looking at some receivers. We're going to have T. Higgins here at 27. I want to reiterate, very similar to Mixon, very similar to Chase. If Burrow trends towards not playing on Monday night, then we will go through and we will move T. Higgins dramatically down these rankings. Mike Williams at 28. We are ranking him here under the assumption that you have no Austin Eckler and that you just naturally have more targets getting funneled to the wide receivers in this offense with both Keenan Allen as well as Mike Williams. We have Amari Cooper at 29. With Amari, he did practice on Thursday, dealing with a couple nagging injuries. Deshaun Watson looks very bad, but Amari Cooper is still against the Steelers, had a fine game. And also against this Tennessee Titans defense, we know you don't really run against them. You got to air it out. You have to push the ball through the air. So I do think that we want to go ahead and probably start Amari Cooper. And then DK Metcalf will be our last guy. With Metcalf, I mean, you do have Jackson Smith-Njigba in my mind, kind of lurking in the shadows, ready to expand his role. Metcalf last year was outside the top 24 wide receivers in points per game. Metcalf the year prior was outside the top 24 wide receivers in points per game. He had like 5 and 6 targets the first 2 weeks. I understand people naturally see DK Metcalf on the TV and they go, oh my gosh, this guy looks like if he steps onto a football field, he's going to score a zillion fantasy points. And he's still good in fantasy. He's just not some elite level option that a lot of people make him out to be. Now, going down to our next tier, we're going to be looking at Rachaad White. Now, the Eagles do have a good run defense, but with Rachaad White, this is a running back that fundamentally is going to get every single touch in this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense when you have Chase Edmonds banged up. And also, he's going to get targeted out of this backfield as well. We're going to have Raheem Mostert at 32. Should be playing in one of the highest scoring games of the week against the Denver Broncos. Will be interesting to see if Jalen Waddle plays. And if Waddle doesn't, I actually think it doesn't really help Raheem. Maybe they look to run the ball a little bit more, but at the same time, this offense will probably be worse overall. Swift at 33. Yes, we are willing to go out there, and I'm willing to play DeAndre Swift. Should be a game where the Philadelphia Eagles are able to move the ball down the field and lead against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're about 5.5 point favorites. They will be running the ball in the second half. Kyren Williams at 34 will actually move up these rankings if you have no Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, as then I think that the Rams would probably be favored in this game, and you actually probably have the Rams winning. Now, with that being said, Kyren Williams is still going to be effective regardless of what the game script is, just because he's getting every single snap out of this backfield and every single target as well. I mean, he's at the very top of the NFL in running back targets currently. Now, our next RB will be Zach Moss. With Zach Moss, 7.5 point dog against the Baltimore Ravens. Does kind of suck to be in that spot, but at the same time, if you are looking at Moss, this is a running back that saw 100% of the running back snaps last week in Indianapolis. Deion Jackson did not touch the football field. Now, Aaron Jones will be a running back that we want to continue to monitor. I kind of threw Aaron Jones in the middle here. Honestly, I'd kind of put A.J. Dillon in this spot if Aaron Jones were to miss. I was honestly assuming that Aaron Jones was going to be missing this next week, but Aaron Jones did get into practice on Thursday, so things are trending in the direction where maybe he's going to be playing on Sunday. Brian Robinson at 37 going up against the Buffalo Bills. Y'all know Brian Robinson was a running back we were drafting a ton of this offseason. You know Brian Robinson was on our buy low running backs in week 1. I'm a Brian Robinson guy. Don't come out here and scream at me that he's too low in our rankings. I know he's been crushing it for us. But the main reason I'm going to have him here is he's going up against the Buffalo Bills defense that just held Josh Jacobs to negative rushing yards this past week, where the Commanders are about a 7-point dog in this game. So I think naturally we probably want to be going through and avoiding the matchup in particular. Now, going over to Michael Pittman at 38, with Michael Pittman is a wide receiver that's been pretty damn good. You have no Anthony Richardson, so Gardner Minshew will be starting for the Indianapolis Colts. It's probably going to be a spot where they have to throw the ball. We just saw T. Higgins have a great game against the Ravens, while at the same time, obviously, Jamar Chase disappointed. I mean, the Ravens do have a banged-up secondary. It's going to be interesting. I know that a lot of people naturally would say, okay, Anthony Richardson's great. Anthony Richardson not being available in this game means we can't start Michael Pittman. Where in reality, no Anthony Richardson may hurt the Indianapolis Colts overall, but in terms of the actual fantasy production for Pittman, I don't think it really has an impact. Just knowing the fact that, hell, at the end of the day, we may see some of those overall points that come from Anthony Richardson rushing the football, having to go through the air with Gardner Minshew. Now, dropping down to our next tier, James Conner is very similar to a running back like Kyren Williams, very similar to a running back like Zach Moss, where he has one of the very few bell cow running backs left in the NFL nowadays. Now, the issue is you're going up against arguably the best defense in the NFL, where right now the Dallas Cowboys are massive, and I repeat, massive favorites against the Cardinals. They are favored by about 12.5 points. And yeah, I mean, this is going to be a game where the Cardinals just get stomped on. Now, Joshua Kelly is a running back that we are going back to the well with if we have no Austin Eckler. If we have no Eckler, honestly, we have to play Kelly again, even though he was very disappointing last week. Should be one of the highest scoring games of the week. Right now, you actually have, the Los Angeles Chargers, Minnesota Vikings, more so as a pick'em. If you look at the spread, like this is going to be an incredibly close game. But if you look at the over-under of this game, it's supposed to be the highest scoring game of the week, and it's not even close. 54 points. And honestly, for that reason, I'm sorry, if Austin Eckler misses, Joshua Kelly is going to be an even better option than this. He still did get every single snap this past week. I'm actually going to move him all the way up to 31. And I know that's crazy. I know that when we started him last week against a tough Titans rush defense, he let us down. But I don't know. We're going back to the well in a beautiful matchup. Now, our next guy will be George Pickens. He was also a buy low player for us week 1 as well. With no Deontay Johnson, George Pickens is someone that you start. George Pickens getting a little more involved over the middle of the field rather than just on the boundaries, which is something that you really like to see. It's going to be another gross game where we have to see the Pittsburgh Steelers and Raiders on Sunday night. Now, Lockett will be our next wide receiver, 41. Lockett had the blow-up week, right? And this is what we're going to see with these guys in Seattle. 1 week, it's going to be Metcalf. 1 week, it's going to be Lockett. The next week, it is going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know a lot of people may think that we are ranking Lockett too low, and if you really wanted to move him up to the Metcalf range, you can. Now, our next guy will be Chris Godwin. With Godwin, I mean, he's seen a similar amount of target volume to Mike Evans, actually. So if I were to go through and quote-unquote buy low on one of these wide receivers, I think Godwin should be better going forward. And then Miles Sanders at 44 is a player that I really need to reevaluate, given the fact that if you are looking at Miles Sanders, this is a running back that now does not have Bryce Young. How does this offense function? I'm probably going to be keeping him here because nothing really changes, right? I mean, this offense is going to be bad regardless. Let's see where this line ends up whenever we are looking at the Panthers versus Seahawks. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to be going Garrett Wilson at 45. With Garrett Wilson, yes, he is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL, but very similar to how we said to sell him last week, how we panic sold Breece Hall last week before the game, which if you did, congrats. Yeah, it's a gross spot. The implied team total for the Jets here is like 17 points. It's supposed to be the lowest scoring game of the week, where literally their over-under's 37 points. You compare this to like the Chargers Vikings, it's so hard to start anybody in either New England or New York. Now, our next guy will be Nico Collins. I mean, with Nico Collins, I mean, the Houston Texans are big underdogs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but that really hasn't stopped Collins and CJ Stroud from putting up volume so far. We've been saying this a lot lately, but it does kind of seem like CJ Stroud, Nico Collins this year, maybe like the Blake Bortles, Allen Robinson of 2015. Not that they're the same talents, but more so that this team's going to be getting blown out a lot, and it looks like we should have some garbage time volume that we can soak up. Now, Michael Thomas at 47. Thomas is a wide receiver that's had an insane amount of volume, and honestly, I'd want to be a little bit more excited. The issue is if you have Olave still dominating in targets and Shaheed has a role as well, it's hard to rank all three of these guys extremely high. Now, Jerry Jeudy, our next wide receiver. With Jerry Jeudy, this is a player I'm going bounce back with. Yes, you start him. We probably shouldn't have started him his first week back from the hamstring, but should be a pretty good matchup against the Dolphins, where right now the over-under of this game is currently 48 points. And if we go through and look at every game this week, I believe maybe this is the second highest. It is the second highest, only behind the Vikings and Chargers. Our next guy, DeAndre Hopkins, should be playing in like a little bit of a gross game environment. With Hopkins, if you are looking at him, this is a wide receiver that's hard to hold what happened against him last week, where he is dealing with the ankle. Should be a very low scoring contest as well, though, where the over-under of this game is only sitting at 39.5 points. Now, Dameon Pierce and Javonte Williams will be our next two RBs. I'm going to be going Javonte over Pierce based off the game environment that he'll be in. And with Pierce, I think we need to be avoiding him if we can, knowing that this is a running back that's currently in a three-man running back by committee that does not have a single healthy offensive lineman in front of him. And if you look at the spread, 9.5 points against Jacksonville, looks like the Texans are going to have to air it out in the second half, and they're most likely not going to be able to run the ball. But I think that's all we have for you in this video. Of course, if you enjoyed it, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to check out any of those pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, find that link in the comment section in the description. Promo code FLOCK, a dollar for dollar deposit match up to $500. Plus, you're going to be getting our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, a special Lamar Jackson pick'em, more than less than half a total yard against the Indianapolis Colts. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you fill out that Google form so we can hook you up with a free Flock fantasy ad if you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.